Geoff Chambers is the Australian's political editor. Geoff, on Sunday night, Anthony Albanese called a press conference, and often these moments are all about, hopes and prayers, thoughts and prayers. We see a lot of platitudes being rolled out. You went straight to the point with the Prime Minister and asked him if he could guarantee the safety of Jewish Australians and if his government had done enough to fight anti-Semitism.
Left unchecked, as you were just saying, anti-Semitism leads to terrorism and violence targeting the innocent. Your government has come under criticism in claiming that it has effectively responded to the rise of anti-Semitism in Australia since October 7, 2023. In September, your government recognised a Palestinian state. Your ministers have attacked the Israeli government. Senior ministers refused to visit the sites of the October 7 massacres. And you created a special Islamophobia envoy alongside an anti-Semitism envoy. Have you taken the threat of anti-Semitism seriously, and can you guarantee the safety of Jewish Australians?
Yes, we have taken it seriously, and we've continued to act. We've continued to work with Jewish community leaders. We've continued to take all the advice from the security agencies to put in place special measures, and we'll continue to do so.
What did you make of his response?
Hi, Claire. Well, the reason I felt compelled to ask that question is he has described this massacre event in Bondi as an anti-Semitic terror attack. And to invoke that word is very triggering for the Jewish Australian community, who have been distraught and felt that Anthony Albanese and his government since October 7, 2023 have not done nearly enough to actually address the scourge, the poison, that issue, and they are living their lives in fear. And it would be remiss of any journalist to not ask the Prime Minister the question, why haven't you done more? And what are you going to do about it? And how do you guarantee their safety? And I got a very, very quick, brief response. It's obviously a very big event. He has gone to Sydney immediately. He went to Sydney straight after the press conference. He was out with the police and Chris Minns first thing on Monday. And now we're going to see a flurry of meetings, federal cabinet meeting, an NSC meeting that he'll chair, and then a national cabinet meeting. And hopefully by the end of today, we will see some of these recommendations that Gillian Segal, the government's own anti-Semitism envoy, who gave them her report in July this year, that they will finally action some of those today.
One of the community's concerns about the response to Gillian Segal's report is the fact that the government hadn't acted on many of those recommendations, suggested that the whole thing was a whitewash anyway. They're similarly annoyed about the fact that at the same time as appointing her, the government announced that they would appoint an envoy to tackle Islamophobia when that had not raised its head as a serious issue on Australian soil in the aftermath of October 7. Do you think the Prime Minister gets that now and is going to change the way he handles his response to her recommendations?
This is our biggest fatality since the Port Arthur massacre in 1996. It's happened in the heart of Sydney, Bondi Beach. This is a big global story. We're hearing now from world leaders, a lot of our allies, that we need to do more in anti-Semitism. The message will be received loud and clearly. The question remains, why has it taken so long? And we've seen, since October 7, a pretty soft response to what happened over there in Israel. We had that Sydney Opera House protest, which should never have occurred. And then there's just been this run of, whether it's a protest across Sydney Harbour Bridge, where they're holding up signs of terrorists, politicians lining up there, whether it was cabinet ministers and ministers in the Albanese government accusing the Israeli government of war crimes. I mean, there's a very big argument that Australia has no role to play in the Middle East. That is just not an area of a sphere of influence that we have any impact on, which always brought everyone back to the political lens that the Albanese government saw things through. And before the May 3 election, if we go back last year, things were looking pretty tight. They were behind in the polls, and Labor hold a lot of very large Muslim Australian seats in Sydney and Melbourne. And so much of what was being announced, or the equivocation, or conflating one thing with another, it was all being seen through that political lens. So we had a lot of money being allocated for Palestinian causes, a lot of visas, and then they win that election. And I guess there was this feeling, which is just insane, that the issue had gone away. And they march on to recognise Palestine with no conditions. One of the first movers to do that at the UN this year. But this issue never went away. And when you contrast anti-Semitic incidents in this country to Islamophobic incidents, it doesn't even come close.
There were two ways that the government could have interpreted that May election result, particularly in those Western Sydney seats. One was, well, we've done all the right things. Those voters have not punished us for being too close to Israel. Because we've done all this stuff about recognising, talking about recognising Palestine. The other way to interpret it was that Australian voters did not believe that Islamophobia and anti-Semitism were equal. That Australian voters actually supported Israel more than perhaps the Labor government might have thought that they did. What was the interpretation the government put on it, and how did that feed into their subsequent decision to do that recognition of Palestine?
Well, the election at the end of the day wasn't won on these issues. Different types of Labor people might say, depending on the area that they're in, that had an influence. But at the end of the day, it didn't, and it was a misread to think that they could then press ahead and allow these hate preachers or Hizb ut-Tahrirs of the world to continue to not go after these people, to put neo-Nazis up there with Sunni Islamic terrorists who have a track record of conducting these types of mass casualty events. So I think it was a complete misread. But then even at a more granular level, in society, whether it was, on our university campuses, these mass protests that still occurred even after we recognised Palestine, from the river to the sea, which means the abolishment of a Jewish state. So, it was hot rhetoric. The security chiefs were consistently warning that the issue had not gone away. And I guess, maybe they thought that something like we saw on Sunday couldn't happen in Australia, or that it would happen somewhere else. And w- the big problem, or the big issue here now for Anthony Albanese, is that this is a public safety issue, a very frightening one. And it doesn't just affect Jewish Australians who are, living their lives in fear, having to have security guards at their schools, which they've always had to do, but they've now got security guards at their places of worship, some family homes, and the issue's getting worse and worse. So that this is now a national crisis, and it's going to require some really sharp and strong leadership.
The darkest possible interpretation of the conduct of Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong, who angered many people in the Jewish community by not visiting the massacre sites when she went to Israel, is that, they actually believe that Israel is bad. And certainly this is something that their faction, the Labor left, has talked about in conferences and back rooms for decades now. What is your sense of what Anthony Albanese actually believes? Do you believe in his soul that he supports Israel and supports Israel's right to exist, or not?
I think he certainly does. Obviously, there is an evolution for a politician or someone in public life. He's now heading into his mid 60s, so the more sort of probably radical left side of the Prime Minister has morphed into a guy that wants to be a very pragmatic leader. He wants to lead for the middle Australia and bring the masses with him. And this is what would have really shocked him, is that he now is under immense pressure to unite the country. And one of the great criticisms of him in his first term was that on a bunch of levels, he always struggled to unite the country, and bring people together. He gets that big election result. He now has that big mandate and that big responsibility.
Geoff Chambers is the Australian's political editor. Thanks, Geoff.
Thank you.